Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the first in a webinar series called Energy Talk. We have with us this afternoon Dr. Steve Courmanopoulos, one of Energy's most valued and long-standing collaborators. And the title of our webinar today is Lessons from the Pandemic, Implications for Recovery in Business 2.0. There is, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions and answers. So I encourage you to type them in, and I will certainly be triaging those and asking Steve Courmanopoulos to answer those once he has an opportunity to answer a few of our questions. These are clearly unprecedented times. As business owners, executives, and managers, we're challenged to navigate this crisis to sustain our operations and our clients, our staff, of course, ourselves, and certainly our loved ones through these uncharted waters. And so we rely on best practices, our experience, and often on pure instinct to guide us in making decisions day by day. Perhaps just as important, we must also rely on our colleagues and strategic partners, of those who can offer a different perspective and expertise in helping us to make those smart decisions, not only today, but in anticipation of recovery and of the future. So as I said, as I mentioned, Steve Courmanopoulos is one of Energy's most valued and long-standing collaborators. Steve is a PhD in psychology and president of Medius International. Since 1972, Medius has worked with global clients to leverage the latest evidence-based psychology to help them navigate through these challenging times. They do this through expertise in three key areas, which include insight, strategy, and culture. The company has a proven record of success in helping many companies identify new areas for growth and to align their businesses as closely as possible to their clients' decision drivers. We've asked Steve to provide some insights into what may await businesses as we emerge from the COVID-19 crisis. Good afternoon, Steve. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
My first question to you, Steve, is can you briefly explain exactly how you support businesses by leveraging evidence-based psychology? How exactly does that work?
Well, it's important for businesses to have the latest information on how people make decisions, whether it's customers or employees. I think it's an area that historically businesses pay lip service to the idea that people are our most important resource and everything happens because of people. But I think that there is not a very good understanding within the business environment of the implications of psychology, both at the individual and group level. So for us, our purpose really as a business is to help clients understand the importance of psychology and to understand psychology itself and how it can be used to engage people in the company's purpose to drive their creativity, to engage their talents. So, you know, we like to say that all business is people, but I'm not so sure that too many companies pay attention to the people as their number one priority, evidenced by the fact that, you know, it's funny, years ago, we used to talk about the personnel department, and it was too personal. And what happened in the 80s with globalization, people became human resources. And that meant that they were just like the petroleum, the cleaning fluids, the building materials. They could be bought and sold and disposed of as needed. So it's a funny message to give that people are our most important resource when they can be just hired and gotten rid of as needed. So I think it's important to understand the messaging that you give people, the things that you say to people, and the expectations that you create. Our basic motto, or not motto, but our basic recommendation is never promise anything you aren't 100% sure you can deliver on. So at the end of the day, if you look at most companies, most of their challenges are people challenges, either understanding their customers, what drives their customers' behavior, understanding their people, how they make decisions, their level of engagement to the company's purpose. And that's what we do. We help companies leverage the latest in evidence-based psychology to improve the way they understand their clients and the way they understand their employees, and are able to fully utilize their talents and their skills and their drive and their enthusiasm.
Do you think that in your experience that larger companies, larger brands are more guilty of that as opposed to medium to small size businesses? Do you see a difference?
Not necessarily. I think that all companies that we've encountered or worked with, they do have a genuine desire to engage people. They do create values and a stated company culture, but very often they have trouble living it in the face of business realities. For example, when profits are down and the shareholders expect you to pay dividends and make a profit, the people is often an easy thing. It's because it's a high cost item. The people are often very easy to let go and then bring back in as you need. But I have not noticed that big businesses and medium businesses are any better or worse at it. They all pay lip service to it. I find that private businesses, sometimes privately owned businesses that are not beholden to shareholders, depending on the value system of the owners, they may have a little more latitude in supporting their people.
Interesting.
Through difficult times.
It's interesting because if you do the math, which is very basic, releasing people when times are not great, for example, if you do the math and look at what the costs involved are to recruiting, to training, to investing in new people and so on, it doesn't necessarily sound or feel like a cost-effective alternative, but yes.
Well, very often, of course, they let them go with the intent of bringing them back when times get better, but often they're not available. They've moved on.
Exactly.
And if you remember, before the pandemic in Canada, we had really a global recruiting crisis. I mean, I know Quebec had 100,000 jobs they couldn't fill. I think Ontario had like another 80, 90. So it was across the board. There were many, many unfillable jobs. And now there will be a lot of people on the market for a while. But if the economy recovers, we might find ourselves back there again. So, but that's a moot point. If people are what drives your business, and you claim that people are the raison d'etre of your business, then you need to be living it, or at least don't talk about it. If you are not committed to supporting people first, just don't talk about it. It's better to say, look, our purpose is to make money, and we will buy and sell and use people to whatever extent we need to. And at least that's honest. I think people appreciate honesty.
Agreed. Which segues well into the second question. You and I have had several discussions, prior to this webinar, and we agree that for many businesses, the light at the end of the tunnel appears, dim at best, as we sit right now, at least for now. But you do see positives resulting from this. So if you could talk a little bit about what do you see as some of those positives emerging from this current crisis?
Well, the biggest positive that I see is that the vast majority of people, when the going got tough, they were prepared to listen to the legitimate authorities, the scientists, the physicians, the politicians. They were willing to listen to them. Before this happened, I think there was a feeling perhaps that people were highly polarized politically, polarized in their views, and that a lot of fringe beliefs had become mainstream just because they were so prevalent on social media. And they were largely sucking the oxygen from the room. And so there was a lot of craziness going on in terms of belief systems and you know, conspiracies and you name it. And I think there was a feeling that the legitimate and fully trained, the scientists, the evidence-based people, they were kind of being left behind. And what I find most gratifying here is that when the pandemic hit, people said, okay, I want real, reliable information. And the fringe, it's kind of fun, but it's still a fringe. So to me, that was a very gratifying thing to see so many people coming together, following the directions given by scientists and physicians and politicians. And of course, you've got people who won't comply, and you've got fringe players. But I would say that at least in Canada, the majority of people seem to be going along with the more credible, evidence-based view of things. Notice the fact that people like Theresa Tam and other healthcare leaders are now on T-shirts and like they're national heroes. So I think we are seeing a return to legitimate authority and legitimate knowledge and science and evidence-based decisions.
But there are still a number of people who are non-compliant. From a psychological perspective, what drives those people? What is it that they're not understanding, or are they in denial, or how do you explain that?
It's difficult to explain. It's difficult to understand. I mean, for many people, just the very act of not complying is a form of identity, right? To be able to say, that's all nonsense. It doesn't apply to me. I'm better. I'm smarter. I'm immune to all this. This is all nonsense. It's all a conspiracy. So I think a lot of people use motivated reasoning. They want to believe something. They want to believe that the risk is exaggerated. They want to believe that there's no particular risk to convening thousands of people on a beach or in a park. And I think that they use motivated reasoning. They talk themselves into believing what they want to believe. And I mean, there are issues around what kinds of characters do that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm just seeing now in the US, there are religious leaders and pastors holding, massive rallies, massive rallies of 10,000 people. And they're saying, look, it's my constitutional right to freedom of religion. So people will find ways to justify what it is they want to do and what they believe, and that's part of their identity. It's part of what makes them feel important. It's just like, the anti-vaxxers. I mean, before this everything happened, you could just have said, well, what drives those people? And certainly there's a lot of identity associated with being a contrarian. With whatever everybody else is doing, I know better.
Interesting. Following through from this discussion, those changes, those positive changes, what kinds of changes in the business climate do you anticipate seeing as we emerge from this pandemic?
Well, I think that what we've seen, if you've looked at what we've seen from politicians and scientists, there seems to have been a lot of straight talk. I follow the news closely. All the premiers are making their announcements, and I notice that there's a lot of straight talk. They're not spinning it, making it sound good. They're just giving you the facts. And I think that maybe that will continue. We may be seeing, I don't want to say the death of spin, but certainly we may be seeing a new validation for straight talk, for honesty and straight talk. I think that's one positive. Now we'll see if it continues or not. People are notorious for forgetting whatever happened and just partying on and forgetting about it and moving on with their lives. But I think just like after 9/11, there, people may have thought we went back to normal, but it's never been normal. There is a hypervigilance around terrorism and risk. There are all kinds of very negative consequences. Islamophobia and other things are residual side effects of that particular experience. And there will be side effects from this experience as well, negative and positive. I think that, but I believe that there will be a new appreciation for straight talk, for social responsibility. You know, all the companies talk social responsibility, right? But it's largely lip service. They still continue to do whatever is most profitable. And so, social responsibility, being willing to step up when the times are tough. If you've looked at what's going on, a lot of companies have stepped up. They've stepped up, whether it was to retool their factories to make masks or shields, or just simply continuing to pay their employees even with no business. So a lot of companies have stepped up to show their social responsibility. Many haven't. And many have tried to be opportunistic, you know, that in adversity there is opportunity. But I think we have to be careful with that. I think there's a lot of danger in trying to find opportunity in adversity while it's all going on, like while it's full blast. Maybe later on. But right now, I think it's a time to show compassion, support for people.
That segues well into a question from one of our listeners that asks, as you know, the farm industry has suffered from a less than stellar reputation.
Right.
And that do you believe that this pandemic is an opportunity for them to improve this image?
This may be the most significant opportunity they have had in, excuse me, in 50 years. You're right. Their reputation has been pretty bad, largely driven by some bad players. You know, by a minority of people doing bad things, and I think I've noticed that a lot of people in pharma and in other areas of healthcare and med tech, they have really stepped up. And hopefully people will remember this. And I think this will go a long way to improving their reputation. But then again, a lot of companies have not stepped up, you know, and they're invisible. But the visible companies, you know, you see them.
Which again, you know, leads me to another question from one of our listeners. You mentioned social responsibility, Steve, as being an important attribute, but many companies can't seem to evolve from a focus on their bottom line. So how would you advise a company to shift that mindset? And do you think it's even possible?
I do think it's possible. And I think there's a fundamental shift that you can make. And I developed this. I'll take credit for it, because I hadn't heard it before. So there's a lot of talk about purpose-driven companies, but there's a lot of cynicism around purpose-driven companies too, because the purpose has been turned into kind of a marketing gimmick, you know. So I think that the major transformation that will need to happen is that purpose will need to become the product.
Mm-hmm.
And that the hard products, the things you have on the shelf, those are simply there to support the real product, which is the purpose. And so they'll need to find ways to make purpose the product and make money from it, which I don't think it's that difficult to do. But the big temptation will to avoid turning it into just another marketing gimmick. Mm-hmm. Just the spinning it, to trying to seduce people into, you know, into buying. I mean, I noticed something interesting. Some companies are foregoing, not just deferring, but foregoing rents or leases, for example, on cars. And other companies are trying to leverage it as a sales gimmick. You know, they'll say, well, buy a new whatever brand of car, and we will defer the first 3 months payments, and and we'll make the next 3-month payments for you. And of course, you know, the whole purpose is to get you to buy a new car. And we know that all those deferments and gifts, you're going to pay for them somehow, right? They'll be built into the value of the car, the value of the lease. To me, those are predatory tactics, and they're really not, I don't think, personally, I don't think they're appropriate where we are today. This is a time to show support. I have to tell you, I think, Esther, as you know, we sold our home and we moved into a very nice apartment building on the water here in Montreal. And way before the government said anything or made it legislation, we got a letter from the landlord saying that they were canceling all rent increases for the year, and that if anybody had difficulties, they should give them a call and they could talk about deferrals and, you know, and trying to help them out in any way they could, which I thought was pretty stellar. And then, of course, 2-3 weeks later, the government mandated it anyway, right? They said, well, there's no rent increases, there's no letting anybody go, there's no repossessions. But I thought it was kind of interesting that good companies did it at the leading edge before they had to. So you have to know that these times today, these are not times for opportunism. These are times for compassion and support. Opportunities will come later as we try to recover from it. There will be opportunities. For example, I think that this exposure to video technology for the masses is going to make a lot of people ask the question, do we need to have so many personal meetings? Do we need to be going to the office? Do we need as big an office if this technology can be quite effective? So there may be opportunities there, certainly, but I don't think that's the right time today. Today is a time for support. It's a time for also building your network. I think it's a great time for building your network. You have nothing to do. You're sitting at home. Listen, go on LinkedIn, start building your network. That's number one. Number two, reach into your your computer Rolodex, whatever you want to call it, of all the people you know, and just send them an email saying, how are you doing? A little worried about you, just checking in to make sure you're okay. No offer of pitch, no, I want to let you know that I'm here to help you if you need something. That's all business opportunity. Right. Just take the time to be human and find out how people are doing and express your concern for them. People will remember that. Nobody wants fair weather friends. Nobody wants people who are there when the going is good. You know, they need you when the going is not so good. So this is a good time to reconnect with all of your customers and just ask them, how are you doing? I'm concerned about it.
Absolutely, and I think people will, whether they travel or not, crave that human contact that we're missing so much. I don't think as humans we were built to be alone. There are a couple of questions that are coming in that are similar in nature. So let's talk a little bit about the business as usual. A signature of your company is psychology drives everything. So right now this pandemic seems to be killing, maybe a harsh word, but at least depleting motivation, energy, hope amongst owners, staff, etc. We are all trying to maintain business as usual, again with virtual beer carts, meetings, cocktail parties Friday as afternoon, which is an energy signature. But in your experience, how do employers help to keep people hopeful when we don't have all those answers?
How to keep employees hopeful? I don't know, because I think it really falls on the larger topic of resilience, if you think about it. So it's normal in times of extreme adversity like this to be depressed, to be anxious, to be scared. It's normal. And a lot of the recommendations that I hear are from other psychologists, psychiatrists, in the media is take this time to hug your kids, take up yoga, meditation, take a course. And these are all great recommendations. You know, learn the piano, enjoy what you have, count your blessings. This is all very good. But in times of crisis, if you think about what is resilience, resilience is not just the ability to bounce back. Resilience is the ability to come through adversity stronger than you were before, right? And so there is opportunity for you personally in resilience. And now resilience is largely a personality trait within the dimension of emotional stability. So resilience is, look, you either have it or you don't. However, even if you're not very resilient, even when, you know, the sky is falling and you're completely destroyed and you're depressed, you're anxious, you may not be resilient, but you can act resilient. And I will tell you a simple thing, all learning chess, hugging your kids, playing with the dog, it's really all great. Nothing will relieve your anxiety and your stress more than taking direct action to solve the key problems and the key challenges in your life. And so, and your self-talk is very important in this, right? If your self-talk is, oh boy, oh, things are terrible. What if this happens? What if that? I could try this, but it's never going to work. Look, if your self-talk is filled with what if and but, you're not going to go anywhere. However, you can turn that around. A resilient person will ask, what if I did this, right? Sure, things are bad, but I think there could be some solutions. And so looking at solutions that directly target the key problems that you have and taking action, even if they're small steps, nothing will make you feel better than the sense that you are moving forward and actually solving some of those problems. And to give you an example, I tell a lot of people who say, oh, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. And I say, listen, let me ask you a question. Could your problem be solved with money? And you know what? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, the problems that I just described, they could be solved with money. So I go, you really don't have a problem. You just don't have enough money, right? You have a money problem. And a money problem is easier to deal with than, for example, if you have relationship problems, if you have health problems. Now, those are real problems because often there's not much you can do about them. But if you have money and career and job problems, there are things you can do, and there are things you can do quickly and immediately, right? They may not necessarily be palatable, but if you have money problems and you need to make money, there are jobs out there that a lot of people simply don't want to do. Right now, there's an urgent need, for example, for people in warehouses at Amazon, you know, packing, preparing orders, becoming a frontline person. A lot of people don't want to do it. They go, oh, look, I don't want to go make $14 an hour and get COVID. But I mean, there are precautions for that. So all I'm saying is that nothing will give you a greater sense of control, and it will diminish your anxiety and your depression. Nothing will give you a greater sense of control than identifying what your key problems are and taking even small steps, small actions, because you can cause a cascade of actions. Once you get rolling and you feel the empowerment that comes from that, hey, I can do this. So, you know, you can go work in a warehouse, you can drive an Uber, whatever. If you need to make money, you can identify opportunities to do so. And so resilience is an interesting topic, right? It's and the most important part of resilience is to act in a resilient way. And the most important part of that is identify the problem and take steps to fix it and actually engage yourself to do it. In other words, do it. Do it. Like one of my colleagues likes to say, he says, put real eyes on it if you want to realize it. You got to put real eyes on it. So I think that you can give comfort as much as you can as a manager, as a leader. You can say, look, things are going to get better and we're going to support you. But at the end of the day, you have to take as an individual responsibility for yourself in these kinds of times. And there are things that you can do to become resilient.
And positive, absolutely.
Well, positive is, of course, negative self-talk is highly destructive. Negative self-talk is highly destructive, and not for the reasons you might think. It's not because, Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking, neuro-linguistic programming. I've gone to some of these courses and they tell you, you got to, all day long, you got to say to yourself this mantra, I like myself, I like myself, I like myself. That's all nonsense, unfortunately, right? The reality is that the things you say to yourself are very important because they communicate with your subconscious, right? And your subconscious is this emotional morass. And a great metaphor is between the conscious and the subconscious. The conscious is this little guy trying to ride an elephant. And that's the subconscious. And the elephant, he's not thinking too much, right? He's very emotional. And if the elephant gets scared, he's going to start running. And there's nothing you can do to stop him, right? So it's important to talk to your subconscious in a way that is calming and positive. So the real reason for positive self-talk is that it calms the subconscious, it calms your emotionality, and above that, it allows you to actually do something. Do something.
Right. And keeping perspective, I think, is important. A lot of these fears or anxieties are speculative or anticipatory and really, not real as with a lot in life. And then, as it turns out, you find that you've wasted all this energy and, time worrying about something that might not necessarily happen. So,
yeah, I mean, it's the old adage that anxiety is interest paid on money not yet borrowed.
Why? Okay.
Good
stuff. One of our other questions here, Steve, is there would be a lot of changes to how businesses are run post-COVID. How do you think we can prepare ourselves, if we can, for times to come once this crisis is over and we return to business as usual?
Well, I think that the initial reaction will be to, in fact, return to business as usual, to try to mirror what we had before, to give us this sense of calm. Okay, everything's back under control, but we will never be the same from this. And just like we were never the same after 9/11, in the sense that, after 9/11, even though things got back, stock markets went crazy and unemployment went down, but 9/11 left a lot of residual issues, right? Left the issues around an underlying anxiety, hypervigilance around violence, and other very negative things. So we're really never the same. It's an interesting play of the mind. And the old German Gestalt psychologists came up with this. They called Prägnanz. And it's the idea that the brain, the mind, always wants to have a sense of predictability, consistency, safety, that things are the same. They've gone back to how they were. It's a complete illusion. No 2 minutes in time are ever the same from how they were. We're not the same. We age every minute. We change in our ideas. So do the people around us. So, the idea that we go back to normal, well, there is no normal. That normal has now disappeared. There is a new normal. But I think in the beginning, companies will simply try to get back to where they were. But at some point in time, they will have to think that this is going to happen again in a different form. And I can tell you, in 25 years of working on companies on their strategic planning, do you know, in 25 years, I have never, in all the key issues that we have managed to elaborate and to focus on, I have never in 25 years of with huge companies, I'm talking about like big players and smaller companies as well, I have never seen the key issue of resilience and preparedness for catastrophic change. I've never seen that in any strategic plan. There's always this idea, things will just keep going on the way they are. Yes, we need to deal with competitive challenges. We need to deal with changes in market demand. So I think that one thing that companies should start doing in their strategic planning from here on in is to plan major contingencies for when the business goes south.
Okay. We have a more of a question here is a little bit more pharma specific. It asks, you have done a lot of work in helping pharma companies become elite vis-a-vis their competitors and stakeholders.
Right.
How would you advise a pharma company that is part of the fight to find a vaccine or drug? How would you consult with them? Should they leverage this opportunity?
Well, I mean, what does leverage the opportunity mean? I mean, just the fact that you stepped up and are willing to work on this as a key issue, that's a big deal, right? So you're leveraging. Are you really leveraging it, or is it leveraging you? Is it an opportunity that simply came? You stood up, you said, yes, I will do this. And you're doing it really out of a sense of compassion and purpose. And sure, you'll likely make money doing it. But again, it's a matter of attitude. If your attitude is, oh boy, I can really count the money coming in now, it's probably not an appropriate optic. I think a better optic is to say, listen, we've stepped up to the plate. And even if we have to give the stuff away, we're more concerned with what happens to our fellows. People will remember this. They will remember the companies who stepped up.
Right.
So, you know, I'm not sure that the idea right now of leveraging opportunity or seeing it as opportunity, it's a good optic. I think, you know, if you see it as social responsibility, compassion, I think that's a far more effective motif.
Excellent. Excellent. And we're coming to a close. So from one final question, and then I'll let you give us some of your final thoughts. As business leaders, as managers, what should we be doing to self-preserve, to stay positive, to stay inspirational and motivating throughout this? We feel a huge responsibility in many ways, and you know, we also need a hug every once in a while, but what can we do as business leaders to keep folks who look to us as role models, as strength? How do we keep going?
Well, you mean personally, how do you keep yourself going, or what are the things you can do with your employees to,
Both.
well,
Both.
I mean, certainly, really, I'm a big believer in straight talk. I don't like spin very much. I think that talk to people in a straight way. Don't bamboozle them. Don't try to massage them. Just have a frank conversation. And if you're the kind of company who's prepared to support your people and say, listen, we're going to do everything we can to help you maintain, you know, your life and your work, we'll do everything we can until we can no longer do it. I think that goes a long way. And in terms of motivation, that's a funny thing. You know, you can't motivate anybody. Motivation it's a huge myth. People either have motivation or they don't for the task that you have at hand. you hire for motivation, and then basically you get out of the way so that you don't demotivate people. So everybody, all human beings have an innate, hardwired tendency to self-actualize, which means to constantly move forward in achieving our potential. So that's there. Even the person who's profoundly depressed or anxious, or into drugs and dope and whatever, that's always there. So that motivation is there. That motivation to self-actualize, and I think so long as you're providing some emotional support and straight talk and say, look, we're here for you, we'll help you, and I think that's all you can pretty much do. Of course, it would help if you said, listen, you'll keep 100% of your salary, and you don't need to worry.
Yeah, no,
Nice.
and I think you've answered the next one pretty much. We talk about the kind of people or companies that will emerge as winners out of this crisis. I think you've explained that it's probably the ones that are more compassionate, as opposed to the ones that are opportunistic. What additional qualities would count, or would?
Well, the difference, whether you're compassionate or opportunistic, at the end of the day, don't say things that you don't mean and that you can't fulfill. Don't make promises that you can't fulfill. Don't tell people are our most valuable resource when they're the first thing to go when the going gets tough. Don't tell people that we have a strong social responsibility, and then when you have no choice, you dump that waste, you bury that waste in some in some field. Basically, do what you say what you mean, do what you say, a high degree of integrity. I think we're long overdue for that in business. If you've noticed lately, the politicians themselves have been very straight, very honest with people. I don't get any, I don't know, what do I know? But I don't get a big spin. I get that they're trying to tell you stuff straight without a lot of spin. So I think that especially for a PR agency, helping clients understand that it should not be about spin. It should be about communicating honestly and effectively with people, and just tell the truth. You don't need to spin it, unless, of course, the truth is not good. And then you have to take your lumps for that, for the mistakes that you made. But
right. I'm gonna ask you to put your psychological / consumer / business hat on for a moment, and we have one question here that suggests that once things normalize, less or more, many potential clients, consumers, and so on will be so busy doing their own thing and trying to recover after this pandemic. How best the question is, how to best launch a pharmaceutical consulting business after COVID, given that everybody's going to be so overwhelmed?
Well, I would say that you don't launch it after COVID, you launch it during COVID. But I mean, it's what I said earlier. This is not a time for opportunism. There are opportunities which you will be able to capitalize on if you perceive them. It's just not a time, but it's a great time. If you have a consulting business, it's a great time to reach out to your clients and not ask them for anything. This is a good time to stop the marketing buzz and just go out there. Personally, what I would do and what I'm doing is I'm reaching out to every one of our clients, everyone we've ever met, and I just send them a little email saying, just a little concerned about you, hope you're doing well. How are things going? That's all. It's just there to demonstrate a human level of compassion without asking for anything. And I think network building right now is a great opportunity. You can I think people may be more receptive to building a network because they realize better, perhaps, how interdependent we all are, and might be more receptive to accepting your invitation. So building a network, supporting your existing network just by asking, how are you doing, without asking for anything. And as things begin to improve, I think people will remember that, who will remember who was there for them, which, by the way, is no different a principle than we recommend to all business people at all times. And that is, make sure you continue to nurture your personal network, your personal business network. Everyone you ever meet, keep their business card. Once or twice a year, send them a little note. How you doing? Just following up. Creating a good, strong business network based on trust and not on predatory practices, I think is certainly a good first step, and it's a good thing to be doing today. As people go back to work, they will have needs. They will discover that, oh, I can't do this, or we lost that person. Then it might be an appropriate time to reach out to them and to say, here to help, anything you need. I would avoid big pitches, and it's not going to be a good time for that kind of stuff in the next foreseeable, 8, 10, 12 months. And things will get back to some semblance of operational, I don't want to call it normality because I don't, but operational effectiveness, let's say, in a year or two. People, stock market will go up, people will have needs, and we'll be back to business. But for now and going into the post-recovery or the recovery phase, you need to keep it real, you need to keep it honest, you need to keep it compassionate, you need to keep it client-centric, and avoid being predatory. Be human, be real.
I think human is the operative word. Steve, I really want to thank you for taking the time to share your pearls of wisdom. We've worked together for a long time, and we've worked with you on a consulting basis as well. So really wanted to thank you. I think you've reinforced a lot of what we already knew relative to what we need to do, how we need to feel, how we need to self-inspire and self-motivate. So we thank you, for that. Any final pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share before we sign off?
My final recommendation, based on everything we talked about, is don't let it become just another slogan. Don't let it become just another joke, a thing that goes up on the wall and it says, here's our purpose, here's our mission, and that nobody knows what it is and nobody remembers it, and the actions that you take have no reflection on it. So think about these things and how you plan to make them real, especially within the context of a business philosophy, a business model that has not changed. And that is that profit is the sole real measure of a business's success. And that's what shareholders want. So I think that we need to make the connection between purpose as product, and reconnect that to shareholder, to profits, and to how companies perform. If you were to ask me if I had a crystal ball and I would think of what is the one major psychological shift that may happen, is purpose as product.
Wonderful. Steve Courmanopoulos, thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. We have recorded this, and we will be putting this session through our channels for you to listen to again or to share with those you feel would benefit. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and
Thank you
for our next webinar.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Goodbye.